The alarm clock blared its usual 6:30 a.m. wake-up call, and I, Ethan, master of the snooze button, reluctantly dragged myself out of bed. Another day, another routine. But hey, routine wasn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Especially when you had a plan, a goal, a future you were building towards. And that future, at least in my mind, included Julia. Julia with her sunshine blonde hair, her laugh that could make even the most mundane joke sound hilarious, and her uncanny ability to always know what kind of takeout I was craving. We'd been together since college, a comfortable, familiar pair navigating the early stages of adulthood together. My life wasn't exactly glamorous. I was an accountant, a master of spreadsheets and tax returns, a champion of the meticulously organized desk. Not exactly the stuff of rockstar dreams, but it was stable, reliable, and it paid the bills. And those bills? Well, they were a part of the plan. The plan to buy a decent-sized apartment, maybe a small house with a patch of grass for a future dog, the kind of foundation I thought we both wanted. Julia, on the other hand, was a free spirit, a whirlwind of creative energy. She flitted from one artistic pursuit to another. Photography 1 month, pottery the next, with a brief but intense foray into interpretive dance somewhere in between. She hadn't quite found her thing yet, but I admired her passion, her willingness to explore, to try new things. Our evenings followed a predictable pattern. Dinner, usually takeout, because who has time to cook after a day of crunching numbers? A movie on the couch, maybe a board game if we were feeling adventurous. Weekends were for exploring the city, trying new restaurants, browsing art galleries, or occasionally venturing out on a hike, though Julia always complained about the lack of Instagrammable scenery. It wasn't exciting, not in the jet-setting, champagne-popping kind of way, but it was comfortable, familiar, and I guess, in my own way, I was content. We had our routines, our rituals, our shared dreams of a future where we'd both made it, whatever that meant. I'd picture us in that future, me with a corner office and a slightly less boring car, Julia finally finding her artistic niche and achieving the recognition she craved. We'd have a nice place, maybe even a dog. A golden retriever, definitely a golden retriever. And we'd be happy. That was the plan, anyway. The comfortable, predictable, perfectly planned future that I thought we were both working towards. Little did I know, Julia had a different vision. A vision that didn't include spreadsheets, routine, or a golden retriever named Max. A vision that would shatter my carefully constructed world and send me on a completely different path. It was a Tuesday, I think. Or maybe a Wednesday. Honestly, the days all kind of blurred together back then, each one a predictable echo of the last. I came home from work, tie loosened, briefcase in hand, ready for the usual routine. Takeout, Netflix, maybe a half-hearted attempt at conversation about Julia's latest artistic endeavor, which this week involved sculpting with recycled yogurt containers. But the apartment was different. Not physically different, of course. Same cramped living room, same slightly too small couch, same stack of unopened mail on the coffee table. But the air was thick with a tension I couldn't quite place. A sense of unease that prickled my skin. Julia was sitting on the couch, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a rigid posture and a frown that could curdle milk. "Ethan," she began, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We need to talk." My stomach did a weird little lurch. Those 4 words, the universal harbinger of relationship doom. "Okay," I said, my voice a little too high-pitched. "What's up?" She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond my left shoulder. "I'm breaking up with you, Ethan." The words hung in the air, sharp, cold, like tiny icicles piercing my heart. "Breaking up," I echoed, my voice a hollow whisper. "But why?" "Because—" She hesitated, as if searching for the right words, the words that would somehow soften the blow, make this whole thing less brutal. "Because this isn't what I want anymore. It's too safe, too predictable." Safe? Predictable? Those were the very qualities I'd prided myself on, the foundation upon which I'd built our relationship, our future. "But we have a plan, Julia," I stammered, my mind reeling. "The apartment, the dog? That's your plan, Ethan." she interrupted, her voice sharp, dismissive. Not mine. I need passion, excitement, adventure. This routine, it's suffocating me. But I started to protest, but she cut me off again. I need to find myself, Ethan, she said, her voice taking on a dreamy, far-off quality. To explore, to experience, to live life to the fullest. And I can't do that with you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. She was leaving me, because I wasn't exciting enough, because I offered stability, security, a future that was predictable. But I love you, Julia, I said, the words a desperate plea escaping my lips. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a strange mix of pity and something that looked a lot like contempt. I know you do, Ethan, she said, her voice softer now, but no less final. And I care about you, but it's not enough. I need more. I need fireworks. And with that, she stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, alone in the silence of our apartment, the echoes of her words ringing in my ears. Safe, predictable, not enough. The words swirled in my head, a cruel mantra that mocked my carefully constructed world, my carefully planned future. The future that now lay in shattered pieces at my feet. The apartment felt eerily quiet. Not just the normal quiet of an empty apartment, but a deeper, more profound silence. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, for the other shoe to drop. But there was no other shoe, just me and the gaping hole where Julia used to be. The first few days were a blur of disbelief and denial. I kept expecting her to walk back through the door, a mischievous grin on her face, ready to tell me it was all a joke, a twisted social experiment to see how I'd react. But the door remained stubbornly closed, the only sound the occasional creak of the old building settling around me. Then came the anger. A white-hot rage that pulsed through my veins, making my hands clench, my jaw tighten, my teeth grind. How could she do this to me? After all these years, after all the plans, the dreams, the shared takeout menus, was I really that boring? That predictable? That safe? The anger gave way to a crushing sadness, a bone-deep ache that settled in my chest and refused to leave. I wandered through the apartment like a ghost, bumping into furniture, forgetting to eat, the days and nights blending into a monotonous cycle of despair. I tried to distract myself. I buried myself in work, staying late at the office, poring over spreadsheets and financial reports, anything to keep my mind occupied. I went to the gym, pounding the treadmill until my legs burned, my lungs screamed, and sweat stung my eyes. I even tried those dating apps Julia was always raving about, swiping left and right with a growing sense of futility and despair. Nothing worked. The emptiness followed me everywhere, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I started questioning everything. Our relationship, my choices, my entire life. Had I been blind? Had I missed the signs? Was I really as safe and predictable as she'd claimed? The doubts gnawed at me, eroding my confidence, my sense of self. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at me, a hollow shell of the man I used to be, the man who had a plan, a future, a woman who loved him. Or so I thought. The breakup wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the shattering of an illusion. The illusion of stability, of security, of a shared future that had never really existed. It was a wake-up call, a brutal reminder that life rarely goes according to plan, and that sometimes the things you think you want, the things you think you need, are just illusions. And as I sat there in the silence of my empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed, I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't just wallow in self-pity, couldn't just let the pain consume me. I had to find a way to move on, to rebuild, to create a new future, a future that was truly my own. It was a Friday night, and I was drowning my sorrows in a particularly questionable tequila concoction at a bar I couldn't even remember the name of. The music was loud, the crowd was boisterous, and I was feeling particularly sorry for myself. "Another one, buddy?" the bartender asked, his voice a gruff rumble that barely registered over the din. I nodded, pushing my empty glass towards him. Make it a double, I mumbled, feeling the familiar burn of tequila sliding down my throat. Rough day? He asked, his eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and pity. Rough life, I corrected, feeling a wave of self-pity wash over me. He chuckled, shaking his head. You and everyone else, kid. You and everyone else. He placed the refilled glass in front of me, then leaned in conspiratorially. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sometimes, the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else. I scoffed, shaking my head. Not really in the mood, thanks. He shrugged, wiping down the counter with a practiced hand. Suit yourself, but take it from an old man, kid. There's more to life than moping around over a lost love. There's a whole world out there waiting to be explored. New experiences, new adventures, new opportunities. His words struck a chord, a tiny spark igniting in the darkness of my despair. He was right. I was wallowing, letting the pain of the breakup define me, dictate my every move. I was letting Julia's rejection control my life. And that's when it hit me. A wave of clarity, a sudden realization that washed over me like a bucket of ice water. I was letting her win. By letting the breakup break me, I was giving her exactly what she wanted. I was proving her right. Safe, she'd called me. Predictable. And she was right. I had been. But I didn't have to be anymore. I slammed my glass down on the counter, the tequila sloshing over the rim. You're right, I said, my voice firm, resolute. Screw this, screw her, screw everything. The bartender grinned, raising an eyebrow. That's the spirit, kid. Now what'll it be, another tequila, or are you ready for something a little stronger? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No more tequila, I said, a new sense of purpose settling in my gut. I need something different. Something that will wake me up, shake me up, make me realize that there's more to life than this. I hear you, kid, the bartender said, nodding. I hear you. Now how about a nice, strong coffee, and maybe a side of opportunity? He winked, and I couldn't help but grin back. The tequila might have been clouding my judgment, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done with wallowing. I was done with letting Julia's rejection define me. It was time to take control, to forge my own path, to create a future that was bigger, bolder, and infinitely more exciting than anything I'd ever imagined. The breakup had been a catalyst, a painful but necessary push in a new direction. And as I walked out of that bar, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of possibilities, I knew that I was finally ready to embrace the unknown, to take a risk, to become the man I was always meant to be. The next morning, the hangover was brutal, but the clarity was even stronger. Staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I saw a guy who needed a haircut, a shave, and a serious attitude adjustment. Safe and predictable were out. Bold and ambitious were in. Julia's words, once a source of pain and resentment, now became a strange kind of fuel. I need passion, excitement, something more, she'd said. Fine, I'd show her passion. I'd show her excitement. I'd show her something more. But it wasn't about proving her wrong. Not really. It was about proving something to myself. About taking control of my life, my future, my happiness. It was about becoming the man I always knew I could be, the man who wasn't afraid to take risks, to chase his dreams, to create a life that was truly his own. The first step was knowledge. I started devouring books on finance, investment strategies, anything I could get my hands on. I spent hours online, researching markets, analyzing trends, learning the language of wealth creation. It was a whole new world, a world of numbers and charts and calculated risks, a world that both intimidated and exhilarated me. The accounting job, once a source of stability and comfort, now felt like a cage, a gilded cage that was slowly suffocating my ambition. I started looking for new opportunities, something that would challenge me, push me, allow me to grow. I also started investing. Small amounts at first, dipping my toes into the stock market, experimenting with different strategies, learning from my mistakes. And there were definitely mistakes. It was a slow process, a gradual buildup of knowledge and confidence. But with each small win, With each successful investment, a new sense of purpose began to take hold. The self-improvement wasn't limited to finances. I joined a gym, started running, even hired a personal trainer, a ridiculously ripped guy named Vlad who seemed to subsist solely on protein shakes and motivational quotes. I revamped my wardrobe, ditching the ill-fitting suits and embracing a more stylish, confident look. I even started taking salsa lessons, a disastrous but hilarious experience that involved a lot of stepped-on toes and awkward laughter. It was a transformation, a shedding of the old, safe Ethan and the emergence of a new, bolder version. It wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming the best version of myself. The version that wasn't afraid to take risks, to chase his dreams, to create a life that was filled with passion, excitement, and yes, even a little bit of danger. The pain of the breakup was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was no longer the driving force. It had been replaced by a new kind of fuel, a burning desire to prove to myself, and maybe just a little bit to Julia, that I was capable of more, that I was worthy of more, that I deserved a life that was truly extraordinary. And as I looked in the mirror, at the man staring back at me, a man with a newfound confidence and a burning ambition, I knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me further than I'd ever imagined. A journey that would lead me to a future where safe and predictable were just distant memories, replaced by a life that was truly, undeniably mine. My once meticulously organized desk, a testament to my accounting prowess, was now a chaotic landscape of open books, scattered notes, and half-empty coffee mugs. Gone were the neat stacks of invoices and tax returns, replaced by a sprawling battlefield of financial reports, market analyses, and investment strategies. I was obsessed. The world of finance, once a distant, intimidating realm, now held me captive. I devoured books like they were the last slice of pizza, highlighting key passages, scribbling notes in the margins, my brain buzzing with new concepts and possibilities. The jargon, initially a confusing jumble of acronyms and technical terms, slowly started to make sense. PE ratios, dividend yields, market capitalization. It was like learning a new language, a language of wealth creation, of financial freedom, of taking control of your future. My evenings, once dedicated to Netflix and takeout, were now spent glued to the computer screen, poring over stock charts, analyzing trends, researching companies. I became a regular at the local library, the librarians giving me knowing smiles as I lugged stacks of investment books to my usual corner table. The initial investments were small, cautious dips into the stock market pool. I started with index funds, a safe, diversified approach, then gradually branched out, exploring individual stocks, bonds, even a little bit of cryptocurrency. A wild ride that nearly gave me a heart attack. There were losses, of course. Stupid mistakes, impulsive decisions, the inevitable setbacks that come with navigating the unpredictable world of finance. But with each loss, I learned. I analyzed my mistakes, researched the factors that had led to the downturn, and adjusted my strategy accordingly. And there were wins. Small wins at first, a few dollars here, a few hundred there. But each win, no matter how small, fueled my ambition, solidified my belief that I could do this, that I could master this game, that I could create a future where I wasn't just safe and predictable, but financially secure, independent, and in control. The confidence grew with each successful investment. I started taking bigger risks, making bolder decisions, trusting my gut and my growing knowledge. I was no longer just an accountant, a cog in the corporate machine. I was an investor, a player in the game, a man who was shaping his own financial destiny. The transformation wasn't just about the money, though. It was about the mindset. The shift from employee to entrepreneur, from follower to leader, from passive observer to active participant. It was about taking ownership of my life, my choices, my future. And as I watched my portfolio grow, as I saw the numbers climb, as I felt the thrill of a successful investment, I realized that I was doing more than just building wealth. I was building myself. I was creating a new identity, a new reality, a new Ethan who was no longer defined by his past, by his failures, by the woman who had told him he wasn't good enough. This was my revenge. Not the petty, vindictive kind, but the kind that comes from within. from proving to yourself that you are capable of more, that you are worthy of more, that you deserve a life that is truly extraordinary. And as I closed my laptop for the night, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I couldn't help but smile. The journey was just beginning, but I knew with a certainty that ran deeper than any spreadsheet or financial report that I was on the right path. The path to financial freedom, to self-discovery, to a future where safe and predictable were just distant memories, replaced by a life that was bold, ambitious, and undeniably mine. Okay, so I wasn't just throwing money at random stocks anymore. That crypto heart attack incident had taught me a valuable lesson. Strategy was key. Turns out, just because something is trending doesn't mean it's a good investment. Who knew? Okay, everyone but me, apparently. My chaotic desk, still a mess of papers and coffee rings, now also sported a whiteboard covered in diagrams, charts, and enough acronyms to make a Wall Street banker blush. I was deep diving into the world of value investing, growth stocks, dividend yields, and all sorts of other financial wizardry. It was like learning a secret code, and I was determined to crack it. I started small, focusing on companies I understood, businesses I believed in. I wasn't trying to get rich quick. I was building a foundation, a solid portfolio that would grow steadily over time. It was like planting seeds, carefully nurturing them, and watching them blossom into something profitable. My research was meticulous. I spent hours analyzing financial statements, reading industry reports, and even attending online webinars. Yes, I was that guy now. I learned to read between the lines, to spot the red flags, to identify the hidden gems that others overlooked. It wasn't just about the numbers, though. It was about understanding the businesses behind them. What were their products? Who were their customers? What was their long-term vision? I even started reading books about business strategy, leadership, and entrepreneurship. It was like I was building my own little business empire, one carefully chosen stock at a time. The calculated risks were, well, calculated. I wasn't gambling. I was making informed decisions based on research, analysis, and a gut feeling that was slowly becoming more reliable. I learned to manage my emotions, to resist the urge to panic sell when the market dipped, to stay calm and focused even when things got volatile. Okay, mostly calm. There were still moments of nail-biting and pacing, especially during earnings season. The returns started small, but they were consistent. A few $100s here, a few thousand there. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was proof that my strategy was working. It was validation, a confirmation that I was on the right track. The confidence grew with each successful investment. I started taking on slightly bigger risks, diversifying my portfolio, exploring new opportunities. I wasn't just playing it safe anymore. I was strategically aggressive, always looking for the next big thing, the next undervalued company, the next chance to grow my wealth. The numbers on my brokerage account started to climb. Slowly at first, then more rapidly. It was exhilarating, seeing my hard work, my dedication, my newfound knowledge translate into tangible results. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the feeling of accomplishment, the sense of control, the knowledge that I was building a future that was truly mine. I still worked at the accounting firm, but the job was different now. I wasn't just crunching numbers. I was analyzing them, applying my investment knowledge to real-world scenarios, seeing the bigger picture. My boss even started asking for my input on financial decisions, a far cry from the days when I was just the guy who filed the paperwork. The transformation was more than just financial, it was personal. I was more confident, more assertive, more interesting. I wasn't just Ethan the accountant anymore. I was Ethan the investor, a man with a plan, a vision, and the drive to make it happen. And as I sat at my desk, surrounded by my charts and graphs, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I couldn't help but smile. The journey was still long. The risks were still real. But I was ready. I had a strategy. I had the knowledge, and I had the drive. And that, I knew, was a winning combination. Okay, so millionaire status. It sounds fancy, right? Like champagne wishes and caviar dreams. And yeah, there were definitely some perks. I traded in my beat-up Corolla for a sleek Tesla. Electric, because I'm also trying to save the planet, okay? And my cramped apartment got a serious upgrade. Think floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that actually inspired me to cook, sometimes, and a balcony with a view that made my jaw drop every time I looked at it. But honestly, the biggest change wasn't the stuff. It wasn't the car, the apartment, or the occasional splurge on a ridiculously expensive watch. Hey, a guy's gotta treat himself sometimes. It was freedom. Financial freedom. The ability to make choices without constantly worrying about money. The security of knowing that I could weather any storm. That I had built a foundation that no one could take away from me. That was the real luxury. Not the material possessions, but the peace of mind. The knowledge that I had taken control of my life, my future, my destiny. The journey to millionaire status wasn't some overnight success story. It was years of hard work, dedication, and calculated risks. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, times when I questioned everything. But I persevered, I learned, I grew, and now here I was, a self-made millionaire. It still sounded strange, even after all this time, like it was happening to someone else, some other Ethan who was living the dream, but it was real. The numbers in my brokerage account didn't lie. The view from my balcony was breathtaking, and the feeling of accomplishment, the sense of pride in what I had achieved, was indescribable. The money wasn't just sitting in my account, though. I was putting it to work, reinvesting, diversifying, building a portfolio that would not only secure my future, but also allow me to pursue other passions, other dreams. I started a foundation, donating to causes I believed in, giving back to the community that had supported me, even when I was just a struggling accountant with a guitar and a dream. I also started exploring other business ventures, investing in startups, mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing my knowledge and experience with others. It wasn't just about making more money. It was about making a difference. About using my success to help others achieve theirs. The transformation wasn't just financial. It was personal. I was more confident, more assertive, more myself. I wasn't afraid to take risks, to speak my mind, to chase my dreams. I was no longer defined by my past, by the woman who had told me I wasn't good enough. I was defined by my achievements, my ambition, my unwavering belief in myself. The safe and predictable Ethan was gone, replaced by a man who was bold, ambitious, and unapologetically himself. A man who had taken his pain and turned it into power, who had used his rejection as fuel for his success. And as I sat on my balcony, overlooking the city lights, a glass of, admittedly expensive, wine in my hand, I couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long, challenging, and sometimes painful, but it had been worth it. Every single step, every single setback, every single lesson learned. I was a millionaire, yes, but more importantly, I was free. Free to live my life on my own terms, to pursue my passions, to make a difference in the world. And that, I realized, was the true meaning of success. The whispers started subtly. At first, it was just a missed invitation to an exclusive gallery opening, a slightly less enthusiastic greeting from the trendy boutique owner, a subtle shift in the social currents that Julia had navigated with such effortless grace. Then, the cracks started to show. The designer handbags were replaced by vintage finds, which, let's be honest, were just old and slightly worn. The lavish brunches at five-star hotels became potluck dinners at cramped apartments. And the Instagram feed, once a carefully curated showcase of luxury and extravagance, now featured blurry selfies and suspiciously filtered photos of rustic meals. Read, pasta with ketchup. It turned out that passion and excitement didn't pay the rent, or the credit card bills, or the hefty tab at that trendy bar where Julia and her new beau, the oh-so-charming entrepreneur with the disruptive startup, were regulars. The startup, as it turned out, was more disrupted than disruptive. The funding dried up, the investors lost their enthusiasm, and the whole thing imploded in a spectacular display of financial mismanagement and broken promises. The charming entrepreneur, stripped of his financial allure, was suddenly less charming. The designer suits were replaced by wrinkled t-shirts, the fancy car was repossessed, and the penthouse apartment became a distant memory. Julia, who had so confidently declared her need for fireworks, was now facing the fallout. The social circles that had embraced her with open arms when she was the girlfriend of a rising star were now closing ranks, their smiles strained, their invitations conveniently lost in the mail. The contrast between her life and mine was stark. While she was struggling to make ends meet, I was closing deals, expanding my portfolio, and enjoying the fruits of my labor. While she was attending networking events at dive bars, I was being invited to exclusive galas, rubbing shoulders with CEOs and FACE and philanthropists. It wasn't that I was reveling in her misfortune. Okay, maybe a little bit, but mostly it was just sad. Sad to see someone so vibrant, so full of life, reduced to chasing after the remnants of a lifestyle she could no longer afford. I'd hear whispers about her, snippets of gossip overheard at cocktail parties or gleaned from social media. Did you hear about Julia? Apparently her boyfriend is broke. She's been trying to get back into acting, but no one's interested. She's been seen at that cheap bar downtown, trying to pick up guys. The schadenfreude was tempting, but I resisted. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about perspective, about realizing that the things she had valued, the things she had chased after, were ultimately empty, fleeting, meaningless. The true wealth, I realized, wasn't in the designer labels, the fancy cars, or the exclusive parties. It was in the freedom to make your own choices, to pursue your own passions, to build a life that was truly yours, regardless of what anyone else thought. And as I watched Julia's exciting life crumble, as I saw her struggling to maintain the facade she had so carefully constructed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. Not the condescending kind, but the genuine kind. The kind that comes from understanding that sometimes the things we think we want, the things we think will make us happy, are just illusions, distractions from the real things that matter. I had found those real things. The passion for my work, the satisfaction of building something meaningful, the security of knowing that I was in control of my own destiny. And as I looked at Julia, at the fading reflection of the woman she once was, I knew that I had something she didn't. True wealth. The kind that comes from within, from knowing your worth, from pursuing your dreams, from living a life that is authentically, undeniably yours. The invitation arrived in a sleek, silver envelope, the kind that practically screams exclusivity. It was a gala, a fundraiser for some fancy art museum, the kind of event where champagne flowed freely, conversations were hushed but influential, and everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread. I wasn't exactly a gala guy, but this was different. This was a chance to network, to rub shoulders with the movers and shakers, the people who could open doors, forge connections, and take my already successful ventures to the next level. I arrived in my Tesla, naturally, feeling a flicker of the old imposter syndrome as I stepped out onto the red carpet. But it quickly faded as I surveyed the crowd. I recognized faces, CEOs, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, the kind of people I now interacted with on a regular basis. I was no longer the outsider, the struggling accountant trying to blend in. I belonged. The air buzzed with a mix of excitement and ambition, the clinking of champagne glasses a subtle soundtrack to the hushed conversations about investments, mergers, and the latest philanthropic endeavors. I navigated the crowd with ease, exchanging greetings, making connections, feeling the power of my own success radiating outwards. And then I saw her, Julia. She was standing near the bar, a forced smile plastered on her face as she chatted with a group of people I vaguely recognized. The designer dress she wore looked off. A little too tight, a little too dated, a desperate attempt to cling to the remnants of a lifestyle that was slipping away. Her eyes met mine across the room, and the smile faltered, replaced by a look of surprise. And something else. Regret? Envy? Maybe a little bit of both. She excused herself from the group and made her way towards me, her heels clicking a little too loudly on the marble floor, a desperate attempt to regain some of her lost confidence. "Ethan," she said, her voice a breathy whisper that was meant to be seductive but came across as strained. "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." "Julia," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. I didn't offer a smile, didn't extend a hand, didn't acknowledge the years we'd spent together, the dreams we'd once shared. Her smile faltered, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape route, a way to salvage the encounter. "You look good," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too eager. Successful. I've been following your career. Congratulations on all your achievements. Thank you, I said, my gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond her left shoulder. She shifted uncomfortably, her carefully rehearsed charm failing to penetrate my indifference. So, she said, her voice a desperate attempt at casual conversation. What brings you here? Still crunching numbers? I smirked, a hint of amusement flickering in my eyes. Something like that, I said, deliberately vague, enjoying her discomfort. She tried another tactic, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. You know, she said, leaning in a little too close, I always knew you had it in you. That ambition, that drive, it was just hidden, waiting to be unleashed. I took a step back, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf between us. Is that so? I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. She nodded, her eyes pleading for a response, a flicker of recognition, anything to break the icy wall I had erected. Well, I said, glancing at my watch, a subtle but clear dismissal. It was nice seeing you, Julia, but I have to go. I have a meeting with some investors. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone in the crowd, her carefully crafted facade crumbling, the reality of her situation hitting her with the force of 1,000 shattered champagne glasses. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew that the image of her standing there, lost and alone, would be etched in my memory, a constant reminder of the choices we had both made, the paths we had both taken. And as I walked towards the group of investors, their faces a mix of admiration and respect, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Not the petty, vindictive kind, but the quiet, satisfying kind that comes from knowing you've proven yourself, that you've overcome adversity, that you've built a life that is truly, undeniably yours. Julia's rejection, once a source of pain and insecurity, was now a distant memory, a faded scar that served as a reminder of how far I had come. I was no longer the safe and predictable Ethan she had discarded. I was a self-made success, a man of ambition and drive, a force to be reckoned with. And as I shook hands with the investors, their congratulations ringing in my ears, I knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with possibilities, opportunities, and the unwavering knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The gala was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the murmur of ambitious conversations. I'd navigated the initial awkward encounter with Julia, her desperate attempts at rekindling something that had long since turned to ash, leaving me with a strange mix of amusement and pity. But now it was time for the real reason I'd come. Across the room, I saw her. Olivia. She stood near a window, the city lights framing her like a halo, her laughter echoing above the din of the crowd. Olivia with her fiery red hair, her sharp wit, and her ambition that rivaled my own. We'd met a couple of months ago at a business conference, a chance encounter that had sparked an instant connection, a recognition of kindred spirits. Our first conversation had been about market trends, investment strategies, and the future of tech. But beneath the professional banter, there was something more. A spark, an undeniable attraction, a shared passion for life, for success, for pushing boundaries and defying expectations. We'd been inseparable ever since. Late-night brainstorming sessions, impromptu weekend getaways, and long conversations that spanned everything from philosophy to the latest Marvel movie. She was my equal, my partner, my confidant, and she was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I'd planned this proposal meticulously. Not just the logistics, the ring, the timing, but the message it sent. It wasn't just about asking Olivia to marry me. It was about declaring my new life, my new self, the man I had become. It was a public rejection of the past, of the woman who had told me I wasn't good enough, who had traded me in for a fleeting illusion of excitement. I excused myself from the group of investors, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement. I walked towards Olivia, the crowd parting as if recognizing the significance of the moment. She saw me approaching, her smile widening, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Olivia, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "There's something I want to ask you." The crowd around us hushed, their attention focused on us, the air thick with anticipation. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the velvet box, the diamond inside glittering under the chandelier lights. "Olivia," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "From the moment we met, I knew you were someone special. You're my partner, my confidant, my best friend. You challenge me, inspire me, and make me want to be a better man. I can't imagine my life without you." I knelt down, the crowd gasping, a collective intake of breath echoing through the room. Julia, standing frozen near the bar, her face a mask of shock and disbelief, was just another face in the crowd now, a spectator to my happiness. "Olivia," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me?" The silence stretched, a heartbeat, two, then erupted into cheers and applause as Olivia, tears streaming down her face, nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." I slipped the ring on her finger, the diamond catching the light, a symbol of our love, our commitment, our shared future. We stood up, embraced, the cheers of the crowd washing over us, a symphony of approval and celebration. I glanced at Julia, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and humiliation. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze, the reality of her loss hitting her with the full force of 1,000 whispered congratulations. This was my moment, my triumph, my declaration of independence, of self-worth, of a love that was real, genuine, and infinitely more valuable than anything she had ever offered. The proposal wasn't just about Olivia and me. It was about the journey I had taken, the transformation I had undergone. It was about proving to myself and to the world that I was worthy of love, of happiness, of a future that was brighter, bolder, and infinitely more fulfilling than anything I had ever imagined. And as I held Olivia close, her laughter mingling with the cheers of the crowd, I knew that I had finally found what I had been searching for. Not just love, but a true partner. A woman who saw me, who challenged me, who loved me for who I was, not for what I could offer her. The breakup, the pain, the rejection, it had all been worth it. It had led me to this moment, to this woman, to this life. And as I looked at Olivia, her eyes shining with love and happiness, I knew that I had finally found my happily ever after.